friends, welcome back to The Big Talk. I'm Trisha Brooke. In this special season of The Big Talk, I'm going to be talking with the most amazing guests from Podcast Row. Podcast Row's mission is to connect entrepreneurs with podcasters to help them share their story. In January, this exclusive event was held in New York City along with an incredible partnership with GLOW, the Global League of Women founded by Lisa Wang. GLOW is a new female-first community amplifying female voices that address critical issues, stories, and thoughts from business to politics and personal challenges. All of my guests this season have an incredible story, and you all know how important that is to me here on The Big Talk. I am super excited to welcome our featured guest today, the amazing Bernadette Joy Cruz Maulion. Bernadette Joy, take a minute to fill us in on anything I missed. I have to introduce you first. Are you ready to drop in?
Yes, I am.
Bernadette Joy Cruz Maulion is a $1 million mission, let me start over. Bernadette Joy is on a $1 million mission to mobilize young professional women to crush their money goals. She and her husband crushed $300,000 of debt, including student loans and mortgages, while changing careers, starting a business, starting a second business, and sharing the journey along the way. Now she is 100% debt-free and shares her experience to help others adopt debt-free lifestyles. Bernadette Joy has an MBA from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and 2 bachelor's degrees in business and psychology from Boston University. Originally hailing from Queens, New York, she now resides in Charlotte, North Carolina with her husband, AJ. You can find her playing board games, hosting potlucks, singing karaoke, and sharing a debt-free lifestyle tip on social media. Bernadette Joy, take a minute to fill us in on anything I missed and talk a little about you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. When you hear that about yourself, you have to take a step back and say, is that me? Is that who I am? And as you were saying it, I was thinking, you know what, this is the first time that I actually feel that I'm going to own my story in a long time, whereas before I felt like I was sharing bits and pieces versus putting that all together and realizing that is all part of who I am. And that's my biggest challenge this year, I will say, is being very open and transparent about the things that I've done in the past to the point where I'm not embarrassed or shy about it, that I actually own it. That's my biggest thing.
That's amazing. And I do this for a living, so I know how to get people to speak their truth on my stages. But I just want to know, is this literally the first time you have owned this about yourself?
I've owned it in bits and pieces in the sense of I've been asked to talk about my story and all of the things that I've done in the past couple of years, but from a personal perspective, it's the first time that I think I'm owning it as a business owner of doing this for other people now. And I'm really excited, but it's also kind of scary.
Welcome to your new normal of
Thank
owning
you.
this.
I'm excited.
Incredible, incredible. Well, I love what you're doing to help women. I love that you are on a mission. All of my speakers are on a mission, and I love this passion that you have for creating debt-free lives. I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
And I also love that you are going to be doing a documentary on this.
Yes, I am. I am super pumped about it. One of the things that I think is such a challenge for me to own this is I never considered myself a creative. I grew up in financial services. I grew up in a very Asian household where it was like doctor or lawyer and that's it. And to pursue something like a documentary felt very far-reaching, but I realized it was a great medium to share the stories of not just myself, but so many other people who are going through this thing. And I want to dispel this myth that I've had, and this is why I think it's different owning it this year, is I've talked about myself personally, and I've been very fortunate to get some great platforms where people have shared that story. And I also made the mistake of reading comments at one point.
Of your story?
Yes, of people reacting to my story. And some of the comments were like, oh, well, if I had a husband who, or if I had a husband, period, I could be debt-free. If I lived in that place and not in New York City, I could also be debt-free. If, oh, you don't have kids, but I have kids, and that's the reason why I'm not debt-free. And so the whole point of this journey is to share 100 other stories that are of people who are not like me, who have different backgrounds, different reasons that they're in the situation that they're in, and showing that they can also accomplish the same things. It's not about just because I happen to be special. It's because I decided, to make a choice for myself, and I think that will be the common ground with a lot of the people who are going to be involved in this project.
I love that. I want to go deeper into the project in just a second, but you said something that made me think you're not special. Well, I think you are special, but the reality is everyone is.
Yes. I think you're right. And I think that is something that gets lost in the narrative of, entrepreneurship, of women in general, is that we all are trying to fit into something that someone else has told us. And there was a light bulb moment for myself that I realized the reason that I got into a ton of debt in the first place is because I cared so much about what everyone else thinks.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I figured out that I was $300,000 in debt in my last semester of my MBA.
And I mean, you were unconscious to that fact until the last semester?
Totally unconscious to the fact. 2 of them were mortgages, which I thought, is normal. But why I needed 2 houses, unbeknownst to me, I thought I was going to be an HGTV, fixer-upper star, and so that's why that happened. But essentially, I went into this MBA program because I knew I didn't want to do what my previous career was, which was in human resources, but I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And instead of taking the time to explore and taking the time to really figure out what the next career move was, I said, you know what will be acceptable to people around me is if I go and get an MBA. That seems acceptable for an Asian person to pursue more education, right? So that's what I did, and I did not realize how much student loan debt I took out to get this MBA, and it was unbeknownst to me too because the majority of the program was online, so it wasn't like I was paying for, dorms or, anything like that. It was still 6 figures that the student loan was. And when I figured that out, I remember thinking, I went into this program and I bought these houses because I cared so much about what people would think of me and my lifestyle, and I wanted to prove to people that I was an adult. And I didn't want people to think I was a loser. So now I'm still in the same position because I'm still not sure what I want to do. But now I'm $300,000 in debt. So that's a wake-up call for sure.
That's amazing. And do you share this story from stages in order to serve?
I do. And I shared it. I actually have my own podcast. And I started out purely because I had so many people reach out to me and they saw my story or they heard me speaking somewhere else. And they would reach out to me and say, hey, I would love to pick your brain. I'm sure you get this a lot too. I'd love to pick your brain. And
I don't pick it. Nobody picks my brain.
Okay, good, right? So I get this a lot. And I was like, my brain is picked over, friend. So yeah. I can't do this anymore. And also I don't drink coffee. And so I told my husband one day, I said, it would be great because everyone's asking me for the same information. It would be great if I could just record my answer and send it to them. And he was like, that's called a podcast, right? Oh, okay. So I recorded a 10-episode podcast that went through the journey of me paying off my student loan debt, not realizing how many other people were dealing with that same situation, even people without student loans. It was credit card debt or something else. And consistently, people have told me their favorite episode is not to be a loser. It's called How to Not Be a Loser. And it was me sitting on my office floor crying about the fact that I had made this realization and that I put myself in this situation just because I cared so much about what everybody else thought.
We talked about this yesterday at Glow. I did the Art of the Big Talk, and part of what I was sharing with the audience was it's important to be vulnerable and to share your story, but you must be ready.
Yes.
Were you ready? Because there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of, I'm sure, stuff that went around that for you. What made you ready to share that?
To be honest, it was very selfish to be ready to share it because I was in such a thirst of knowledge of how to get out of it. So the main reason that I was sharing it with people is because I wanted to know if anyone had any bright ideas on how to fix this. And what I noticed was, what happened was I figured out this whole debt situation, and then I started Googling stuff. How to get out of debt. And there's a ton of great information online, and a lot of it was really more on the math side and more so of, well, yeah, if you just invest in this amount and then 20 years later you'll be rich. And then I also noticed that the vast majority of the advice out there were people who were much older, who were generally white, and who were men. And a lot of the advice that was out there was, just eat rice and beans and don't have fun for the next 20 years and you'll be fine. And that just did not resonate with me at all. So I was looking for people who were financially responsible but also still had a a semblance of a social life and fun, and those are the people that I wanted to learn from, and it turns out everyone had the same questions that I did.
That's amazing. And now you're sharing those from stages and from your podcast in order to help people.
Yeah, it's been really fun. One of my first big speaking events was for a kind of large brand based out of North Carolina, big underwear brand that everybody knows. And
You can say it online.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it was Hanes, right? So I went to Hanes Corporate. They have an annual women's diversity conference, and they asked me to come speak as part of one of the workshops. So they have, the breakout sessions, and all 4 workshops are going at the same time. And they asked everybody to come on stage for 30 seconds on the main stage to just explain what their workshop is so people can pick which one to go to. And I wasn't prepared for that, and I went up there and I said, how many people would like to have more money? that's what my pitch was. And
everybody's hand goes up.
Yeah, and everybody's hand goes up, and I said, I'm Bernadette Joy. I paid off $300,000 of debt in the last 3 years, and I just would like to share how I did that. And they told me afterwards they had to turn people away from my workshop, and they had to ask people to go to the other ones because it was too full, and I never expected that. And here I was going into this conference thinking, who's going to come to my workshop? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm talking about. And turns out everybody was probably thinking the same thing I am, is that how can an average person like me be more financially free?
And I love what you're saying about I don't know what I'm talking about. I've never done this before, but you are the credible expert because you lived it, and that makes you credible, relatable, and because you're sharing your story, vulnerable, which is what a great speaker is.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think that is very hard to find in the industry that I am in with finances. I have been approached by a lot of financial advisors, and I've been very careful to tell people I am not a financial advisor. I don't have any of the licenses, nor do I really want to. But when people think of a financial advisor, they usually think of someone who wants to invest all your money and all of that stuff. And I realized that when I would get approached by financial advisors, it was very shocking to me how many of them, when I would ask them, can you tell me more about your personal finances to see if I can trust you with my money, and most of them wouldn't tell me.
Fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I thought that was really surprising because I would think, would you go get a haircut from someone who had terrible hair, right? Like, that doesn't make sense, right?
Well, let's be clear. In the theater business, lots of costume designers are terrible with their own style, so it's not always that case.
Okay, that's fair. That's totally fair. My expectation would be of a person who's good with money that hopefully they would have a good financial picture. I wasn't looking for someone to be a millionaire or something.
And they would be transparent because they're good at it. Right?
Yes,
that makes sense.
And then on the counterpoint, I remember meeting this one financial advisor who was a woman, and she was talking to a room full of entrepreneurs, much like this conference that we're at, and she was talking about all these things, and I could see people glazing over when she was talking about 401ks and IRAs and all this other stuff. And I went to her afterwards and I said, I'm just curious, what's your background? And, why are you interested in talking with entrepreneurs? And she said, well, I'm, an entrepreneur myself, but I just went through a major divorce and I had to find a new career. And I was, so in the hole. And she said, my net worth right now is only $300,000. And, so I don't really tell people that. And I said, what do you mean only $300,000? And you just went through a divorce and you were in so much debt before that? That should be your story. Why are you not telling that? And for some reason, that doesn't seem to be the norm in this industry.
And that's why your documentary is going to be so eye-opening. Let's talk about that a little bit. As my listeners know, I'm a documentary filmmaker as well. In order to have a ripple effect and reach more people, I want to make movies about people doing amazing things. So tell me about your plan for this. You're going to tell your story, I'm sure, and then you're going to interview others.
So yes, it's going to start out a little bit about me, but the hope is that the focus is really not around me at all, and that is a major shift that I'm having this year. Is instead of sharing my stories, how can I share 100 other stories of other people? And it came up with this idea of $1 million. It just seemed like a good number to eliminate. I said, okay, when it happened last year in April, when I paid off my house, I said, all right, we've been working through this for the last 3 years. What's my next thing? I said, I would love to help other people pay off their debt, but what would that look like? And I said, $1 million sounds like a good number. There's a couple ways I could go about this. I could find one person who has $1 million of debt and help them pay it off, but that would not be as interesting or not as relatable to the vast majority of people. And also, $1 million of debt is a completely different level of debt that I probably don't understand. And then I looked on the flip side, this is my Asian math self, was I could find 1 million people and they each pay $1 of debt, and that would also equally equate to that goal, but that doesn't seem reasonable. So what would be that good in between? And that's where the $10,000 for 100 women, it seemed like 100 women, that is a good impactful number of people that I feel like I could support. And $10,000 seems totally reasonable for those women to pay off, and that would be $1 million. And that's where I'm in the process right now, is hand selecting those 100 women who's going to be part of this journey together.
That's incredible. Are you still looking for subjects?
Absolutely. That's actually why I'm here today, because I want to find women who are like-minded, who are interested in this project, and it's just in its early stages, and I want to see the diversity of women that I see at this conference, all ages, all types of backgrounds, single, married, everything that you could think of, because I really think that there are so many things that a lot of people can contribute to this, but I think the one common thing will be that we all have some sort of debt that we want to pay off. But I also think that the majority of the learning is going to come from each other and not just from me. And that's what I'm really excited about, is not following just the money part, but what is the story behind each of these women.
That's incredible. May I give you some advice?
Yes, I would love it.
Be sure to choose a few subjects who do not believe you can help them.
Yes.
Wholeheartedly.
Yes.
You need some that are tricky, because that'll make for good storytelling.
Yes. Fortunately or unfortunately, that has been more of the norm. So, so the goal will be to recruit them too.
That's
to
amazing.
It for sure.
That's amazing. Share with our listeners, if you would, Bernadette Joy, why sharing your story is so important. Why sharing their story is so important, whether it has to do with debt or not, in terms of making the world a better place.
I totally, wholeheartedly believe in sharing your story. I am a strong introvert. I don't usually think that somebody wants to hear what I have to say, and I've been proven otherwise for the last 3 years. And even just yesterday, I got a message from someone that said, "Hey Bernadette, thanks to your podcast, my husband and I are $500 away from paying off our student loans." And I've never met the person before. And it's one thing to share your story with family and friends, and I think that in and of itself is amazing. If you are brave enough to share your story with people who you might not even know, who might even judge you, might not even like you, I guarantee there's probably someone out there who is listening to that story and saying, I can relate to that, and I think I can do that too. And I think if you help one person with your story, I think that's worth it.
Absolutely. I want to thank you, Bernadette Joy, for being a featured guest today on The Big Talk. Where can our listeners get in touch with you?
Sure. If you are interested in joining my project on the 100 Women, it's crushyourmoneygoals.com. And if you want to follow me on social media and see the progress along the way, I'm Bernadette Joy, but it's spelled with debt, the word debt.
We are going to put all of this in the show notes, because I am sure many of my listeners are going to reach out to you to be involved in your documentary.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this special season of The Big Talk with guests from Podcast Row and the Global League of Women. Check out the next episode, and remember, live your truth, be your authentic self, and drop in.